This is the story of a man who lost his place in the world, if he had one to begin with. This man lived on his own on the outskirts of a city and lived life at his own pace. He worked away his days in an office building, diligently fulfilling the work set out for him. He was always perfectly punctual and never stepped a foot out of line. A model member of society. He would spend breaks with his colleagues, hanging out around his friend group as they idly chatted about their day, their work, their lives. He spoke up when he could, and his colleagues would listen to his occasional contributions to the conversation, but he mostly just liked to listen and spend time with them. Then, when the workday was done, he would return to his home and entertain himself in his off time. He would watch TV and videos, play video games, and sparingly engage with people online about the current trends. Many a fun evening passed as he became enraptured by the entertainment the world had to offer from the comfort of his own home. And when the late hours crept up on him, and the days drew to a close, he resigned himself to his bed and drifted off into a quiet, peaceful slumber. No one else to distract him, no one else to overwhelm him. He lived life at his own pace and in his own space. Spending his days this way made the man feel satisfied and content. Living like this made him happy. One day, the man went to work and toiled away his day as usual. Except, he noticed something unusual about the way his co-workers reacted to him that day. They would have their conversations like normal, but when the man spoke up, everyone would turn to look at him with a hint of surprise, almost as though they hadn't realized he was there. But after the shock wore off, they would listen to what he had to say, and the conversation would carry on once again. The man thought it was strange, but he was used to having a lack of presence among the group, so he thought little of it and went about his day. Then, when he returned home, something similar occurred. His messages online would only get responses a good hour after they were posted. Maybe they're just busy, he thought. Chalking it up to just a weird day, he occupied himself with another night of TV and campaigning through video games. He entertained himself for hours in his dimly lit home, and when the fatigue set in, he went to bed to peacefully rest up for another day. He'd felt disconnected from others as he reflected on the day that had passed. But maybe it was just one of those days, he figured. After all, living life like this made him happy. These strange events weren't limited to that one day, however. For the next few days, he would feel more and more distant from his colleagues, and be less involved in conversations online. After a week, he would have to speak up multiple times before he would get his colleagues' attention. "Hey, listen to me," he would call out, to which they would once again react with surprise, not even aware he was talking to them. Feeling disgruntled and ignored, the man resigned himself back to his work. And, when he would message acquaintances online, they would reply as though they had never interacted with him before. Like all the time they had talked and had fun together meant nothing. Feeling confused and outcast, he tried to find solace in some gaming until the night called him to sleep once more. As the man laid on his bed and reflected on the last several days, he couldn't help but feel emptier than he used to. Living like this made him unhappy. This continued for several more days, and the man felt himself have less and less presence in the world. The feeling made him lightheaded and a little bit sick, as he wondered why no one would make him feel involved or needed. Finally, one day, he arrived at work on time as usual, yet no one seemed to greet him. In fact, no one seemed to notice him at all. This worried the man, but he carried on his work like normal and tried to pay no mind to the people who wouldn't give him the time of day. Then, when his break time rolled around, he called out for attention as he had in the days before. "Listen to me," he shouted, desperate for attention. Only, no matter how hard he tried, no matter how loud he spoke, his words remained unanswered. Distressed, he stepped in front of them and waved and begged them to look his way. But despite all his best efforts, no one even flinched. It was as if he didn't even exist. Now the man was truly disturbed. He returned to his work to try and take his mind off of things. Only, when he did, he found all the work he had done that day had vanished without a trace, as if he'd never been there to begin with. The man ran out of the office in a panic. Surely someone could see him. Someone would acknowledge his existence. He tried to get the attention of someone, anyone who might listen. But whether it be a colleague or a random passerby on the street, no one noticed the frightened, lonely man. Eventually he made it back home and tried to extend his cries for help to the internet. He furiously typed on social media and message boards, anything he could think of to get his word out. But mysteriously, the messages would never be sent. No one was able to hear his cries for help. Before long, the man gave up in despair and distracted himself with entertainment until he passed out. Living like this was meaningless. The man woke up in a daze and contemplated what to do. What was left after losing all sense of belonging, all sense of purpose, all sense of self? Who even were they anymore? They reached for their phone to once again try to get the word out. But to their dismay, their hand effortlessly passed through it. Again they went to grab it, only for their hand to clutch at thin air. In a panic, they tried to use their computer, only for their hand to pass through the keyboard just the same. They sprinted for the front door, only for their body to silently crash against it. Yet they were unable to grasp the handle. There was no escape. They were trapped, unable to communicate with the outside world. Was this a punishment? They thought to themselves. Is this what they deserved for keeping their distance from others? For enjoying life how they wanted? They refused to believe it. Wasn't there meaning in their life just for existing? Why were they the only ones being excluded like this? They silently banged on the door and cried out, "Please, anyone out there? Please, listen to me." Over and over they called out. But nobody came. No one was able to hear their pleas for help. They stared down at themselves, watching as their bodies slowly became more and more transparent. But any sense of horror they should have had at this sight was gone, as emptiness took over their heart. After all they had lost, from their phony relationships to their place in the world, in the end, one of the last things they lost was hope. Hope that anyone would ever love them or care about them ever again. They slumped themselves with their back against the wall and resigned themselves to their fate. In the dark of the cage they once thought of as a home, the last remains of their form faded away, leaving behind In the days that followed, strange phenomena occurred. Many people fell unconscious at their desks, computers or TVs, anything with a sound system. The victims of this phenomenon came from all over, but a surprising majority was centralized in one city. No leads could be found as to the cause of their ailments, and many would never wake up again. Those that did recover, however, spoke of a voice that called to them, one familiar yet forgotten. And the last thing they would remember was the voice asking to hear them out, to make them feel alive again. What about you? Would you take a little time out of your day to help them? To make them feel valued as a person? Will you listen to what I have to say?